Hello, welcome back to Teacher Jeff 40K. There is a lot I would like to talk about in this video. So, I got my hands on the Iron Hands Codex supplement, and it is incredibly powerful. So, I almost don't know where to start here. I think what I'm going to do in this video is give a full rundown of the Codex supplement, how it interacts with the Space Marine Codex, because it does interact with it, and you do technically need a Space Marine Codex in order to use the Iron Hand supplement or any of the supplements. And I will be using this as a sort of example video on how to use supplements as well, because I'm not going to go out and get all of them. They are $35 each, but I will be grabbing a few actually. I have a feeling I'm going to be getting the Salamanders one as well. White Scars, it looks good. So does Ultramarines, and so does the Raven Guard, but it's not my playstyle, so I'm not really going to jump into those. I might get Imperial Fists though. I like the way that looks. But that's just kind of the beauty of it too, is it comes down to your playstyle, what you enjoy, how you like playing it. Now, that being said, this Iron Hands Codex, objectively speaking, is incredibly strong. So not just, I enjoy playing Iron Hands. It's really good. I have a feeling come some updates by the end of the year, this codex and some of the codex supplements will be getting a little bit of a downgrade to sort of equalize, because as it stands, the Iron Hands Codex supplement is ludicrously strong, almost comically so. Like I saw some of the rumors before the Codex came out, and I saw the interactions with the combat doctrines and some of the stratagems and the character, and I thought this is too good to be true, but it's all true. So before I get into the meat of it, what I'm going to do is start sort of from a broader picture, simpler outlook on how to use the Codex supplement, and then maybe dive deeper into some of the specifics of how it interacts with certain units, what's good to use with it, pretty much everything. But there are some things that are better than others, and what exactly you get out of this. So to start us off, I'm going to crack this guy open. You've probably seen some other Codex reviews and stuff like that online. I'm not necessarily going to be covering every single, what's the word I'm looking for, stratagem or relic or things like that, but I'm going to be covering the general outline of it. Some of the stratagems that I think are pretty good, some of the relics that it's going to make your life a little hard because there's going to be so much stuff you want to choose. There's a lot to choose from. So from a basic outset, to use the Iron Hands supplement, you do technically need a Space Marine Codex, because the Iron Hands supplement doesn't have any units in it. It has one unit, and that is the Iron Hands special character, Iron Father Pharos. So he is ludicrously good, by the way. So I have a feeling he's going to see a point increase come chapter approved or something like that, because wow. So I think what sort of has happened is, before the release of the Space Marine Codex in August of this year, 2019, Space Marines were in a rough space. A lot of things were not getting chapter tactics, like vehicles. The chapter tactics themselves were on the weaker side. The stratagems some of them were pretty good, and point values were in a weird place. I mean, this is going to happen with all codexes to a certain degree, but Space Marines were not necessarily competitive. You could still win games, you could still have a good game, no problem. And then with the new Space Marine Codex and these supplements, I feel it kind of swung all the way the other way, and now they're incredibly powerful. So, I mean, I don't play often in tournaments. In fact, I usually don't play tournaments. I play on the sort of, I like to have a good time when I play a game, but I also want to build a list that can fight and win, somewhere around there. Now, I'm going out on a limb here maybe, but it looks like the Iron Hands is like right up there, top tier, really, really, really strong. So how do you use this? Like I said, you'll need a Space Marine Codex. You'll need the Iron Hands supplement. And then you'll have some choices to make. So what happens here is that you basically, with the Iron Hands supplement book, you can use the Iron Hands or an Iron Hands successor chapter, in which case you are still using their chapter tactics. If you don't know what chapter tactics are, I've made a video about those as well. Go ahead and check it out. I've got a playlist on how to start a Space Marine army if you'd like to check that out. Now, the chapter tactics you must use are Iron Hands. Of course, they're really good. This involves 6+, you ignore wounds on everything now, barring servitors, but who cares? You overwatch on 5s and 6s. And for vehicles that have 10 or more wounds, you count as having double the wounds for your damage table. So this implies that if you have 5 wounds on a vehicle, it counts as having 10 wounds for the purposes of the damage table. Doesn't mean it has 10 wounds, it means it counts that way for the damage table. All 3 of these are good. Now, one of them alone wouldn't really be enough. 2 would be strong enough, and 3 is just crazy good. So right away, you've got some incredible chapter tactics. Now, with combat doctrines, so if you're familiar with Space Marines, you get 3 combat doctrines. Now, you don't just get to choose them how you like. The way it is, the start of the game, you start with Devastator Doctrine. This is how it works. You can't ever be in a different doctrine on the first turn. So you start in the Devastator Doctrine. Starting turn 2, you can decide to move to the Tactical Doctrine should you choose. You don't have to. Keep that in mind. You don't have to change if you don't want to. So from there, turn 2, you can decide, okay, I'll go to the Tactical Doctrine. And by turn 3, you can choose then to go to the Assault Doctrine. You can choose to just stay in Devastator Doctrine, or if you've shifted down one to Tactical and you want to stay in Tactical, that's cool too. You can never move back up except for a stratagem that can be used once in battle, which is in the Space Marine Codex. Now, what these do is they give a bonus -1 to weapons within that category. So Devastator is heavy and grenade weapons, get a -1 AP. Tactical is assault and rapid fire weapons, get a bonus -AP. And then Assault Doctrine is pistol and melee weapons. So depending on how you've made your army, depending on where you are in the game, you may want to be in a different place. What makes Iron Hands so strong right out of the gate is that their bonus to this is within the Devastator Doctrine. So what do I mean by that? Now, you start the game in the Devastator Doctrine. This implies that you have a further -1 to your heavy and grenade weapons. Grenades you won't really be paying attention to. It's the heavy weapons that's the big sell here. So the cool thing is, each Space Marine Codex supplement, Iron Hands, and the other ones that have been released thus far, all have a bonus to one of the doctrines that sort of suits and flavors their army. So the Ultramarines have one that's in the Tactical Doctrine. The White Scars add, I think they add 1 damage during the Assault Doctrine with melee weapons. So it's very much to their playstyle. Rush in, get into combat, and fight. And the Raven Guard, I believe it's also in Tactical, and it has to do with characters. I'm not 100% sure on that. Now, if we look at the White Scars, theirs is in the Assault Doctrine. Now, that means you will have to have played 1 turn at least in Devastator Doctrine, 1 turn at least in the Tactical Doctrine, and then you can get to your Assault Doctrine, where your bonus for being White Scars shows up. Iron Hands, on the other hand, you start in Devastator Doctrine and your bonus is in the Devastator Doctrine. And it's crazy powerful. So what you get whilst you're in the Devastator Doctrine with an Iron Hands army, keep in mind only Iron Hands are going to get this. You get moving and firing heavy weapons with no penalty, which on its own is huge. And you reroll ones with heavy weapons. So what does this mean? One, it means you start the game with this. So keep that in mind when you're building an Iron Hands army. If you start the game and you have a whole bunch of heavy weapons that have very long range that can reach out, you're getting your benefits from the doctrine immediately. And you don't ever have to change. So that's something to keep in mind. Heavy weapons are your friend now. You don't even have to worry about moving and shooting with them. It's fantastic. Things like dreadnoughts that have assault cannons, or I'm putting together a Redemptor dreadnought at the moment. He doesn't have his arm yet, it's right here. But he's got this thing, a heavy onslaught Gatling cannon. Keyword, heavy. And it is a heavy weapon. And considering its medium range, I kind of want to move to get it in range. And I don't have to worry about that. I can just move and shoot it. And I reroll ones. So this is going to allow a couple of things. One, you don't necessarily need to depend on taking captains in your HQ slots. Captains are very good. They're beefy characters. They provide support to your models. And they give you a reroll ones to hit bonus. Now, if you're rerolling ones with heavy weapons, no matter what, and you're moving and firing, it's not really that crucial to have captains around. You don't have to have any at all if you don't like. That's not necessarily how you'd like to play it. Personally, I like to have captains around. I like those rerolls, and they're good characters in their own right. Giving them a nice power weapon or something that'll deal out some damage really helps them out, and it allows them to boost the units around them. But with this, move and fire heavy weapons, so you're hitting on 3s probably, depending on your profile. And you get a further -1 because it's the Devastator Doctrine to all those heavy weapons anyways. That's just for being Space Marines. And you reroll ones to hit, which is really good. And further improving on that, this is sort of a not so obvious bonus, but a great synergy with Iron Hands, is that let's say you have a vehicle like this Redemptor Dreadnought. So he's got the heavy onslaught Gatling cannon, and he's got 13 wounds. Let's say he's down to 6 wounds. That would put him in a damaged bracket, which means that he'd be hitting on 4s. And he'd be hitting on 5s if he moved in any other army. Since you're Iron Hands, 1, Devastator Doctrine is active, if it's active. You move and fire heavy weapons with no penalty. That means he's hitting on a 4. Number 2, because you're Iron Hands, your chapter tactics means that those 6 wounds count as 12 in the damage chart, which means he doesn't count as being damaged for his ballistic skill, which means you're back to hitting on 3s, even though you moved, even though you're damaged, and you're rerolling ones. This is incredibly strong, and it makes Iron Hands vehicles incredibly strong. Not just the ones with the damage bracket, but anything that is moving and firing heavy weapons, or just firing heavy weapons in general. You get to reroll ones, and you get a bonus AP. -4 AP las cannons are amazing. They're in an amazing place, because -4 is enough to ignore any 3+ armor save. And it's strength 9, which usually is going to wound things on 3s, barring any psychic buffs or other powers that may be boosting some toughness 8 vehicle or monster beyond that, or any crazy Titanic crap that's going to come out of Forge World. But it means that heavy weapons on heavy vehicles, or just vehicles in general, are your new best friend. They not only are they tough now, because they're just tougher vehicles, toughness 7, toughness 8, depending on what you choose, Moving and firing heavy weapons, no problem. You're shooting and moving, for that matter, counting as having double the wounds that you have. So even if you're damaged, it's not a big deal. Tech Marines are heavily supported in this codex as well, so you can repair those wounds. And as an Iron Hand, you ignore wounds on a 6, and all those heavy weapons are overwatching on 5s. So that's pretty good. They're also overwatching on 5s, and you're re-rolling 1s. This is why I played a few games now with the Iron Hands Codex. I don't usually shift out of the Devastator Doctrine. It's incredibly rare. It takes me a moment to kind of calculate, okay, what are the benefits here? And I had a couple of drop, sort of suicide type squads drop in. I had a bunch of melta-guns and a bunch of plasma guns, which are assault and rapid fire weapons. And I had that come in, and I'm thinking, wow, you know, if I had shifted to the Tactical Doctrine, they would be getting a -1 to that, the AP of that. And then I thought, wait a second. I've got a few other units around here with heavy weapons. They're going to be re-rolling 1s. They're getting a bonus -1 to the AP. And they can move and fire, which just allows me a whole slew more options. So this is why it's incredibly powerful, is you just start with the Devastator Doctrine. So you don't even have to change it. And you're getting 2 incredible benefits. I would not be surprised if the Iron Hands bonus to the Devastator Doctrine saw a nerf as well. I wouldn't be surprised if it was you can move and fire heavy weapons at no penalty, and they lose the lose the reroll 1s, something like that. And it would still be very powerful. It would still be very, very powerful if you lost that reroll 1s. So you've got that. And man, heavy weapons are so strong. If you're building yourself an Iron Hands list, so strong. Weapons that normally I would consider to be, oh, they're okay. You know, I wouldn't necessarily take them. I'd rather have something else, are now seeing inclusion in my lists. I'm thinking of things like whirlwinds. Whirlwinds now that reroll 1s and have a -1 to their launcher are actually really beefy. So the Whirlwind Vengeance launcher normally is a strength 7 -1 2 damage weapon. With the Devastator Doctrine, it now becomes -2 and 2 damage. You're re-rolling 1s, and if you need to move for any reason, you can, and still with no penalty whatsoever. Very, very potent. So, Iron Hands machines, it's the way to go. Iron Hands vehicles, I mean, the troops are still powerful as well. You could have a squad of Devastators, which are regular Marines, and they can move and fire with las cannons at no penalty. And they're re-rolling 1s. Very cool. So this means that now, if you get yourself some lieutenants, it could make your list very strong. If you are firing a bunch of heavy weapons, you're re-rolling 1s to hit. If you've got lieutenants nearby, you're re-rolling 1s to wound. This will make things that are, you know, typically like one shot, but incredibly powerful. Things like las cannons, missile launchers. Those types of things will become very, very reliable. It's almost as though you're getting a salamander bonus with the reroll 1 hit, reroll 1 wound, and you're still Iron Hands. So very, very, very strong. Let's talk about this character, Iron Father Pharaohs. He is almost comically underpriced, to be honest. He's only 110 points, and I was super surprised when I saw this. I thought this was, I mean, it's obviously encouragement to buy the new model, because the new model is $50 for this. Anyways, I'm going to make my own, just because I'm not spending $50 on a single model. It's a nice model. It looks cool. He's very powerful. I'm not spending $50 for that. That's ludicrous. I'm going to make, I've got the parts set out right here. Got a couple of ideas here of what I'd like to do. I've got some spare sort of servo arm type pieces, a heavy bolter, and a big axe somewhere, so I'll be able to make something. And then I'm planning on using an old school Terminator body, adding arms to it. Got some extra aggressor shoulder pads, so something like that. Honestly, as long as you go WYSIWYG, so what you see is what you get, it shouldn't be a problem. Try to get as close as possible to his actual size, and make sure you're showing the gear that he has. So you'll need a heavy bolter like weapon, 2 servo arms, and he's got a big power axe. If you've got that on a marine model that looks a little bigger and beefier, you should be fine. It really shouldn't be a problem. You shouldn't have to spend $50 to get this incredible character. So, Ironfather Pharos, 110 points. What do you get for this? You get 5-inch movement. He's in, what's the armor again? Gravis armor. He's in Gravis armor, so he's a little slower, like an aggressor. Weapon skill 3+. So, unlike most characters, he's not incredibly skilled in combat, but still good enough. Ballistic skill 2+. So he is technically a Tech Marine. And in fact, he has the Tech Marine keyword, which we'll get to in a second, because that interacts with something really cool. Strength 4, toughness 5. Again, the Gravis armor giving him toughness 5. 7 wounds, not bad. 5 attacks, leadership 9, and a 2+ armor save. Again, he's a Tech Marine. Tech Marines just have 2+ armor. They're just, I guess, better at shielding themselves, building stuff for themselves. He is equipped with a bolt pistol. Cool. Frag and crack grenades. You'll probably never use those. He has Gorgon's Wrath, which is his heavy bolter, which is just a better heavy bolter. So it's heavy 3. Remember, Devastator Doctrine helps this guy out. Strength 5, standard, -2 AP, -3 with Devastator Doctrine, and 2 damage. Very strong. And remember, he hits on a 2+. He can move and fire the heavy weapon, no problem. And he's re-rolling 1s for it because it's a heavy weapon. So right away, that is a awesome weapon. And then he's got Harrow Hand, which is his power axe. +3 strength, -2 AP, 2 damage. Respectable. It's a good weapon. Nothing wrong there. You probably don't necessarily want this dude in combat, but he can handle himself. He's also got 2 servo arms that can do some attacks, albeit at a -1 to hit. So yeah, he's got the 2 servo arms with that as well that do a flat 3 damage, -2 AP ×2. But you can only make 1 attack with each servo arm, and you subtract 1 from the hit roll. So he's good in close combat. He's excellent at shooting, and he excels as a support character. This guy is a support character through and through. He's just a support character with a great gun on his back. He's got Angels of Death, of course, which is the Space Marine umbrella rule, the bolt weapon thing, which doesn't apply to him because it's a heavy weapon. The Shock Assault rule, which gives him bonus attacks in certain circumstances. And, of course, the Doctrines, which he has access to. So he's got a Signum array. At the start of your shooting phase, you can select 1 friendly Iron Hands unit that's within 3 inches of Ironfather Pharos. Models in the selected unit have a ballistic skill of 2+. Amazing. We'll get to, what that's super good for in a second. Master of the Forge. When this model repairs a vehicle using its Blessing of the Omnissiah. So, Blessing of the Omnissiah, what's that? That's the Tech Marine rule that allows a Tech Marine that's within 1 inch of a vehicle, an Iron Hands chapter vehicle. It allows that Tech Marine to repair the vehicle up to D3 wounds. But with Ironfather Pharos, his is not D3, it's just 3 flat wounds repaired. So every time you're going to repair 3 wounds. So he's just a better Tech Marine. So, to recap, he's got a wicked heavy bolter. He gives 1 unit 2+ ballistic skill that's within 3 inches of him, and he repairs vehicles. So, if you're seeing a little bit of a pattern here, stick this guy next to a really good, gunboat style vehicle. He'll be able to repair it, and he can give it 2+ ballistic skill, which is great. And considering if you've got something, say, like a Land Raider that has 4 las cannons and a double heavy bolter, those are all heavy weapons. You'll be re-rolling once to hit with them anyways. Then, Artificer Bionics. When this model would lose a wound, roll a d6. On a 5-up, that wound is not lost. So instead of a 6-up, he doesn't lose wounds on a 5-up. Keep in mind, this is not stackable with the Iron Hands chapter tactic. It means you get a 5-up to ignore wounds, not a 5-up and then a 6-up. There was it's either in one of the FAQs or something like that, where they stated, Games Workshop stated, that you can't have multiple instances of trying to ignore wounds. So he just gets to ignore them on a 5-up, which is great. Rites of Tempering. This one is where it just sort of skyrockets into awesomeness. Because right now, as it stands, this character being able to repair a vehicle 3 wounds, ignoring wounds on a 5, having that great heavy bolter, and giving a model in that area 2+ ballistic skill, I think is worth 110 points on its own. But then this happens. Rites of Tempering. Models and friendly Iron Hand units have a 5-up invulnerable save, whilst their unit is within 6 of this model. So anything that has any models within 6 of Iron Father Pharaohs get a 5-up invulnerable save, making Iron Hand's vehicles crazy tough to kill. This means that they ignore wounds on 6s, these vehicles. All of their heavy weapons are getting all those Iron Hands bonuses. He's able to repair the vehicle 3 wounds straight up every turn if he's close to it. And now it's got a 5-up invulnerable save. And considering most Space Marine vehicles, pretty much everything in the Codex, does not have an invulnerable save, that is quite a big deal. So any hardcore heavy weapons coming your way, hitting your vehicles, there's a chance they're just not going to do anything. And then after that, even if they do get through, you've got a 6-up to ignore wounds, and then he can be repaired later. So this is what this guy makes Iron Hand vehicles around him so hard to kill, and so strong, and so offensively gifted. This means that not only will your enemy struggle to wound your vehicle because they're tough already, usually things like toughness 7, maybe even toughness 8, they'll be tough to wound. It'll have an invulnerable save. If not, it's got armor as well. If the attack coming through doesn't have a great AP value, then it'll ignore wounds on a 6+, and then it'll be able to be repaired. And even if it does get wounded, and it's one of those ones with 10 or more wounds, because you're Iron Hands, you count as having double the wounds for your ballistic skill. It's fantastic. So this guy is a fantastic model. Now, he also interacts very well with one of the stratagems in here. Remember when I said he had the Tech Marine keyword? Well, if we go to the Iron Hands stratagems in the book, there is one that's very cool here for 1 command point. Use it in the movement phase after an Iron Hands Tech Marine model from your army has used their Blessing of the Omnissiah ability, which Iron Father Pharaohs has. That model can use that ability again and can repair a model that has already been repaired this turn. So typically, he can repair 3 wounds on a vehicle. With this, for 1 command point, he can repair 6 wounds, either 6 on the same vehicle or 3, and then 3 on another vehicle that he's close to. This is incredibly powerful for 1 CP. And there's no roll for D3 that come back. He just gets 3 that get repaired. And then, if you really want something that is, let's say, for example, we'll use the same example here. This Redemptor Dreadnought is on the verge of death. It's got 2 wounds left, right? Still counts as having 4 wounds for the purposes of shooting, but it's not ideal. Iron Father Pharaohs, right nearby, repairs at 3 wounds. So now instead of 2 wounds, he's got 5. and he counts as having 10. So he's got 5 wounds. And then you use this stratagem, and all of a sudden he's got 8 wounds left. And then, if we look at the psychic powers, and we use Reforge for Warp Charge 5, which is incredibly low. If manifested, select one friendly Iron Hands vehicle that's within 3 inches and visible to this Psyker. That model regains up to D3 lost wounds. So he's got 8 wounds, and he regains D3 more. You can repair a vehicle, one single vehicle, up to 9 wounds in a turn with that, which is terrific. And it also is going to have sort of a psychological effect on your opponent where all that damage that he did or she did to whatever vehicle they tried to hit is almost just undone. In one of the games I played recently, I had a Venerable Dreadnought. And I had actually, and we'll get to that later actually, that's going to be confusing. But I had a Venerable Dreadnought, and my opponent brought the Venerable Dreadnought down to 2 wounds remaining. And I had not Iron Father Pharaohs, I wasn't using him, I was just using a Tech Marine. I used a Tech Marine, regained 3 wounds. I rolled a D3, I got 3. And he's back up to 5 all of a sudden. And then my Psyker used the Psychic ability on him, and I regained another D3 wounds and brought him back to full health. So this was very, very demoralizing because he had to, 1, punch through the armor of a Dreadnought, which is already pretty tough, toughness 7, 3-up armor save. And then I got to ignore wounds on 6s because I was Iron Hands. And then I just repaired all those wounds. And he was back to full. No problems whatsoever. So you can really, really repair stuff. And even if your vehicles are damaged, they're still highly effective. So Iron Hands vehicles. I mean, the Iron Hands troops, infantry, and bikes are pretty strong as well. They're getting a lot of those bonuses too. This implies Iron Hands attack bikes can move and fire their heavy weapons no problem. So suddenly attack bikes are pretty decent as well. Typically an attack bike with a multi-melta is kind of, like it's one shot, you move, so you get a -1 to hit. Now, an Iron Hands multi-melta attack bike, not only does it move and ignore the penalty to hitting, it's AP -5 with the Devastator Doctrine, and it rerolls 1s to hit. So suddenly that bike becomes incredibly dangerous. Very cool. Iron Hands land speeders. Man, it's interesting because when I first saw the Codex, I was thinking, okay, castle time. This is a perfect opportunity to break out all my long-range vehicles, castle up, and just blast my opponent off the table and never get touched. Or when I do get touched, I repair things, or I count as having double the wounds, I ignore wounds on 6s, all this other stuff to just sort of stay alive. And someone pointed out, I didn't even think of this, but Iron Hands land speeders. Land speeders are meant to move, but they're all equipped with heavy weapons. So it means you're getting the -1 penalty to hit. But if you're zipping around with heavy weapons, the missile launchers, heavy bolters, assault cannons, multi-meltas, you're ignoring that penalty and you're re-rolling 1s, and you're getting a bonus -1 to the AP of those weapons. So zoom in a land speeder with a heavy bolter and assault cannon. Both those weapons have -2 AP. Both of them re-roll 1s. And you can get yourself in range, move and fire with no penalty. Considering the points for land speeders just went down quite a bit, it makes them a little more viable too. A land speeder with the double missile launcher and a multi-melta becomes an incredible mobile tank hunter. So lots of options, and you can go with a pretty mobile Iron Hands list. The Tech Marine on bike is still available in the index, and everything in the index that has not been replaced in any of the codexes or the supplements has been given the Angels of Death special rule, which means it won't take away your combat doctrines. So Tech Marine on bike, if you want to go very mobile, it's still a great choice. He can zip around, repair vehicles, do some damage in his own right. Very, very useful. So it means that there's also quite a few ways to play Iron Hands. Some of them are a little stronger than others. Like if you took, if you took a castle, if you wanted to castle up with Iron Hands, you'd have a easy first turn, barring any crazy unlucky dice rolls, you not going first, getting a bunch of stuff wrecked, whatever. If you are rolling with a whole bunch of vehicles in the backfield, unengaged, and they all have heavy weapons, you're going to have a great time. You're going to have a great time just killing stuff. And if you want to go mobile, you can too. Land speeders. You can just move your tanks too. Hell, a Vindicator. A Vindicator is hyper strong now. You move and don't suffer the penalty. It's now got D6 shots. You re-roll ones to hit with it. You can get in range with it. It becomes really, really dirty. And I would say that normally the Hunter Killer is not an option I would take. But if you have the Devastator Doctrine active, those 6-point missiles that are usually, it's only one shot. I don't really necessarily need it. Sometimes they miss. Now, those, since they're heavy weapons, are now -3 AP. They reroll once to hit, and you can move and fire them. Which now means that suddenly your Ironclad Dreadnought with 2 Hunter Killer missiles, it's not really silly for him to have it anymore because he can move and fire them. And trust me, you want to move an Ironclad Dreadnought. Or even a Rhino. Put him on a Rhino. Rhino moves up the field, fire a missile. There's no minus to moving and firing a heavy weapon, and in fact, you're going to reroll a 1 on it. So it makes that one-time missile far more reliable, and it's more damaging because it's still a -1 added to it, making it -3 AP. So Hunter Killer missiles on all the vehicles, barring, I'd say, things like whirlwinds where you kind of want to hide out of sight so you don't necessarily draw a line of sight with the missile. You're thinking of your bombarding weapons. Thunderfire cannons. They give you a Tech Marine right there to repair the cannon. You can hide out of line of sight. It's a heavy weapon. Having Strength 5 -2 AP is very good. Very, very good. It eliminates 5-up armor saves, which is fantastic. So dealing with anything like guardsmen or any like Eldar infantry that don't necessarily have an invulnerable save or something, you just choose the armor. And it can hurt medium targets. And it can really damage heavy infantry as well. That -2 is huge. Any Space Marine type models are getting a 5-up armor save against it. So it's good stuff. I'm not going to go through all these units here because there are so many units that this benefits. That's why this feels so almost ludicrous how strong this is. But man, there's so much. I was explaining the rules to my friend who plays Imperial Guard, and he had this great what the hell is going on face the entire time, and he was like, when's my new Codex coming out? When's my new stuff coming out? When am I going to get extra bonuses to all of my guys? So you've got a whole bunch of wicked stratagems you can choose from, and this does not mean you cannot use the stratagems in the Space Marine Codex. So now you have effectively 6 pages of stratagems. It's overwhelming, to be honest, and I found myself looking back after the game and thinking, I could have used this or that or this, or take a little time, look through all of them, see the ones you're going to use. It might be worth investing in the data cards, although I feel bad endorsing that because it's like $20 for paper, and it's like you already have it in your codex. Or write the stratagems down on a piece of paper, the ones you may want to use, that sort of thing, just to remind yourself. So there's a lot here. There's one I already mentioned where a Tech Marine can repair twice. But there are a bunch of other ones that are really, really strong. So let's look here. There's a couple that sort of stood out to me that I want to talk about here. Okay, yes. So there's one for one command point, reject the flesh, embrace the machine. Use the stratagem in any phase. When an Iron Hands infantry unit from your army is chosen as the target for an attack. Until the end of that phase, when a model in that unit would lose a wound, roll a d6, adding 1 to the result if that model has the all flesh is weakness warlord trait. Talk about that in a second. On a 5+, that wound is not lost. So any infantry, so it's not vehicles this time, but any infantry units will basically get a 5+ to ignore wounds. That can be very strong for a unit that you really need to stay alive that's going to take in a lot of firepower. So that can basically turn your 6+ into a 5+ for one command point. Now, it makes reference to the all flesh is weakness warlord trait. That warlord trait gives you a 5+ to start with. So if you decide you have a character that is going to get stomped in combat by something, you can give that character, if he's already got this warlord trait, you can use this on that character and they will actually get a 4+ to ignore wounds because it adds 1 to the 5+ he already has. Keep in mind that's infantry only though. So any characters on a bike or any dreadnought characters. That brings me to my next stratagem. So next here we've got March of the Ancients. This one I used as well, and it's super cool, especially on dreadnoughts that have fewer than 10 wounds. Use this stratagem before the battle, after nominating a model to be your warlord. Keep in mind that any stratagems used before your battle, you can use them infinity times, as long as you have the command points to use them. So, use this stratagem before the battle, after nominating a model to be your warlord. Select one Iron Hands dreadnought. Any dreadnought that you so choose. Ironclad, Venerable, Regular, Redemptor, any of the Forge World stuff, Contemptor, whatever. You are going to get, they will become a character, effectively. That model gains the character keyword, 1. Add 1 to the attacks and leadership of that model, which is, for most dreadnoughts, really strong. Just the extra attack and the fact that everything has shock assault now means these guys, most dreadnoughts, will get 6 attacks on the charge. And their weapons are so beefy. So, as an example, I'll show you what I did. It's not an ideal choice, but it did well. And there are obviously several options for this. This guy. I took a Venerable Dreadnought. I gave him an Assault Cannon and the Dreadnought Close Combat Weapon and a Storm Bolter. This guy's quite cheap now, considering all the points drops to the Dreadnought Close Combat Weapon and all that stuff. So this guy's quite cheap. I think he's like 120-ish points, which is very, very, very good. So this guy now, he's a Venerable Dreadnought, so he hits on 2s in close combat and with shooting. He can move and fire his heavy weapon and re-roll 1s with it, and the Assault Cannon is -2 if the Devastator Doctrine is active. And if he charges in, is charged, or makes a heroic intervention, because he's a character now, he gets a bonus attack to the bonus attack he already gets for now being a character, giving him 6 attacks. I had this guy in my game. He was hard to touch because he was a character and I kept him behind things. And then, when my opponent finally got to attack him, this was that same Dreadnought I told you about earlier. He brought him down to 2 wounds and I just got him repaired right back up to full. And it made him especially pesky to deal with. Very hard to kill. Keep in mind that ignore wounds on a 5+ stratagem will not work because he's not infantry. But that would be ludicrously powerful. And of course, you could use this on an Ironclad Dreadnought, which could allow him to really get into combat without really being shot at first, and then get those extra attacks that are just so brutal with like the Dreadnought Chain Fist or his other was the seismic hammer. I don't use that one because it's got a -1 to hit, but very, very, very strong. If you wanted to make another dreadnought a character, that could be okay. Although, if it's something with 10 or more wounds, he can still be targeted and doesn't really benefit from the character warlord or the character stratagem other than to perform heroic interventions to get a bonus attack and the bonus leadership for whatever that might help you with. Maybe some psychic power that's leadership based. So that's pretty radical. And also, this now, if you spend a couple of stratagems, you would be able to give an Iron Hands character, or a new Dreadnought character, a Warlord trait, which could be very cool for you. Mind you, that would cost you 2 command points. It would be 1 command point to make the Dreadnought a character, and it would then be 1 command point to use Paragon of Iron. Use this stratagem before the battle, after nominating an Iron Hands character model that is not a named character to be your Warlord. You can generate 1 additional Warlord trait for them. This must be from the Iron Hands Warlord Traits table. All of the Warlord traits your army includes must be different. Oh, actually, no, never mind. Because this would imply that it's your Warlord only gets an additional Warlord trait. There was one that gives someone else a Warlord trait. No, clearly I was wrong. Sorry about that, guys. But that being said, this would still work if you have a Chaplain Dreadnought. A Chaplain Dreadnought counts as a character. It's got the character keyword. That one's from Forge World, so, or you could do some converting. But the Chaplain Dreadnought would already have the character keyword and could be your Warlord and could have 2 Warlord traits. And considering the Chaplain Dreadnought has fewer than 10 wounds, it means he won't be able to be targeted, and he's going to be really, 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 really strong. Now, moving on, you have a couple of cool other stratagems you can use. One of them allows you to keep an objective you've already achieved, a tactical objective, and then get it again. So if you've got a really, really good one for 2 command points, you can try and get it again the next turn if it's one of those like sure thing type of objectives. Might be worth it to try and grab some points. Let's see, what else have we got here? There are a couple of fluffy ones that are specific to like dealing with Emperor's Children or some of the Chaos Legions. And where was it? There was another one I really wanted to look at here. Yes, okay, so you can get a further, like, okay. Use this stratagem at the start of your movement phase if the Devastator Doctrine is active. Until the start of the next battle round, when resolving an attack made with a heavy or grenade weapon by an Iron Hands model in your army, an unmodified wound roll of 6. Add an additional 1 to the armor penetration characteristic of that weapon for that attack. You can only use this stratagem once per battle. So that can make heavy weapons with low AP value ultra strong. If you want, you can have -3 AP heavy bolters. Or you can have, say, this thing, which dumps out 12 shots, but it's -1 AP. Devastator Doctrine's active, -2. You use this stratagem for 2 CP, -3. That is a bunch of shots coming in at -3. So things like assault cannons, onslaught Gatling cannons, heavy bolters, auto cannons, things that have moderate to no AP suddenly become really, really useful. It's not really going to help you that much with things like las cannons, because if the Devastator Doctrine's active, las cannons are already a -4. You may not need a -5, but if you got missile launchers at -4 could be cool. Although it is 2 command points, so you never know. But that being said, this is for your army. So this is something where you do have to get a wound roll of 6, but it's anytime anything uses this. So that's pretty cool. Then what have we got here? Oh, yes. So this one is kind of cool too, actually. And it allows you, it's actually one of the ones I should have used and I didn't use when I played my game. Use this stratagem at the start of your shooting phase. Of the shooting phase, excuse me. Select one Iron Hands infantry unit from your army until the end of the phase. So keep in mind, it's only the shooting phase this works. When a friendly Iron Hands character within 3 of that infantry unit would lose any wounds as the result of an attack made against the model, that unit can attempt to intercept that attack. Roll a d6 on a 2+. That model, the character, does not lose those wounds. The unit suffers 1 mortal wound for each of those wounds. That can be ignored on 6s because you're Iron Hands. Only 1 attempt can be made to intercept each attack. So it's only in the shooting phase, meaning in close combat, guys can't jump in the way. It's only shooting phase. But during my game, I had an opening to one of my characters, and my opponent dropped in a squad of Inceptors, which are the jump pack Primaris models with assault bolters. He dropped those guys in, and he shot my character in the back and killed him. I could have used this stratagem very easily as there was a tactical squad well within 3 inches of my character. So I would have been able to jump in the face of a few of those wounds. So this can be used if you make a mistake, basically, like I did. We all make mistakes. The movement phase is one of the hardest phases to really try and master. So if you make a mistake, or if you want someone to cover for someone else, if you've moved certain things, like you want to get someone's aura abilities within a region, but it kind of exposes them, you can use something like this. Next, I want to just have a quick look at the Technomancy discipline. So it's worth noting that if you decide that your Psyker is going to use psychic powers from the specific Iron Hands psychic discipline, Technomancy, which sounds like a great, great album, it means that they can only choose from that discipline. So they cannot choose one from, say, Technomancy and then one from the Space Marine Codex. You've got to choose all or none. So you either choose them from the Space Marine Codex, which you still have access to, even if you have the Iron Hands supplement. You can still take the regular Space Marine Codex ones, and there are some really good ones in there. Makes it hard to decide, actually. Or you could take all from Technomancy. So you have to choose. Keep that in mind. You can't take 1 and 1. So Blessing of the Machine God, this one's really cool. It's only warp charge value 5, which is cheap. Select one friendly Iron Hands vehicle within 12 of the Psyker. It has a warp charge value of 8 if you select a Titanic vehicle, however. Until the start of the next psychic phase, when resolving an attack made by the model, add 1 to the hit roll. This psychic power is incredible for a lot of reasons. 1, you pick a vehicle that suddenly adds 1s to its hit. Now imagine, again, you've got the Devastator Doctrine active. All the heavy weapons are re-rolling 1s. All the heavy weapons ignore moving and shooting. All the heavy weapons have a further -1 to their AP, and now you've added 1 to the hit roll. And consider this. If you have the Psyker in the back with your vehicle with long-range weapons, the chances of your opponent having a Psyker within denial range are very slim, and this is an easy power to get off for only warp charge 5. That is an incredibly useful power. I'm thinking of things that are just outside of the Titanic range. Repulsor Executioner, Land Raider, Storm Raven gunship. Things that have a lot of heavy weapons and a lot of range. Okay, next. Objuration Mechanicum. A lot of these are really good and it's hard to choose. Objuration Mechanicum has a warp charge value of 7, so it's a little steeper. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 inches. Excuse me, I've been fighting off that yawn all day. It's not because I find this boring. It's just been a very long day and I'm tired. But this one, you have to select a unit within 18 inches and visible to the psyker. So he's got to be able to see it. Until the start of your next psychic phase, when resolving an attack made with a ranged weapon by a model in that unit, on an unmodified hit roll of 1, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound after resolving the attack. Basically, you turn all of the opponent's weapons in that unit into plasma weapons that are supercharged. So without all the bonuses of supercharging plasma, I mean, they could be las guns and they'd still just get hot. Basically, he's superheating the guns, which is really, really, really cool. So it's a little on the steeper side with Warp Charge 7, but it could come very clutch in certain situations where you've got, well, first of all, it's any unit, by the way. So keep that in mind. It doesn't necessarily have to be infantry. It could be a vehicle. It could be a monster, whatever you want. Fury of Medusa. Warp Charge 6. If manifested, select one enemy model within 18 and visible to the psyker. Draw the shortest possible imaginary line. Straight line, 1 millimeter wide, between the psyker's base and that model's base. Roll a d6 for the selected model's unit and each other enemy unit that the line passes across, adding 2 to the result if the unit rolled for is a vehicle. On a 5 or a 6, a 4 or 5, the unit being rolled for suffers 1 mortal wound. On a 6+, the unit being rolled for suffers d3 mortal wounds. This one is situational, but potentially super damaging. So add 2 to the roll if it's a vehicle. So if you roll 2, you're going to get that mortal wound. If you roll a 4 or a 5 or a 6, it counts as that 6 for d3 mortal wounds against vehicles. This is one of those ones where you're best having your psyker far away from the target. You pick a target, sort of line them up in the movement phase so that you can pass across as many models as possible or as many units as possible and get as much potential damage out of it. Situational, but incredibly powerful if used properly. Psi Steel Armor. Psi Steel Armor has a warp charge value of 6. Select a friendly Iron Hands unit within 12 of the psyker. It does not have to be visible. Keep that in mind. Until the start of the next psychic phase, when resolving an attack made against that unit, add 1 to the saving throw. Invulnerable saves are not affected. So it doesn't affect invulnerable saves. Okay, that's out of there for now. Add 1 to the armor saving throw. That can be really big. And this is cool because if you have a unit that is gaining the benefit of cover, you get the cover plus this. So now imagine you have got a unit of something basic. Primaris Intercessors, 5 of them. They have 3-up armor, they have 2-up armor and cover, and they have a bonus to that armor in addition to the cover. So let's say your opponent is shooting at that unit with something that is AP -2. So that's -2 plus 2. They're back to just having a 3-up armor save, which is quite good. And it's also worth noting that Psi Steel Armor is not just for shooting phase. So the Psi Steel Armor adds to their armor even if it's in melee combat. So there's that, which cover you don't get in melee, but you'll get this. So that one's okay. That one's all right. Reforge, warp charge value of 5. If manifested, select a friendly Iron Hands vehicle model within 3. This is the one I told you guys about before. It's basically a repair. But the cool thing is, since it's not technically a blessing of the Omnissiah ability, you can target a unit that has already been repaired with that ability, which you normally would not be able to do. But since this is just a psychic power, then you can do both. So you can effectively repair a vehicle very well with that. That one I like just because it's cheap. Warp charge value 5. Select a vehicle, regain D3 mortal wounds. So going back to Psi Steel Armor for a moment, this will also make a vehicle very tough. Very tough to kill. Just adding to that armor, it's got high toughness, it ignores wounds, it's got a better damage bracket, you have the abilities to repair wounds in a lot of different ways. This is yet another way to just make your armored columns incredibly durable. Machine Flens. This one I think is the most interesting, but I'll probably never use it. Maybe. Machine Flens has a warp charge value of 6. If manifested, select one enemy vehicle unit that is within 18 and visible to the Psyker. That unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. Cool. So it's specific to a vehicle, but it just suffers D3 mortal wounds. There's no roll for that, other than the psychic test, of course. But you get the psychic test, you get the D3 mortal wounds. You can then select one other enemy unit that was within 6 inches and visible to that vehicle. So it's got to be pretty close to the vehicle, and it's got to be visible to it. So select a unit when the power is manifested. Roll 1d6 for each mortal wound that the vehicle unit suffered. For a 3+, the other selected unit, for each 3+, the other selected unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So what I think is really cool here is basically the Psyker is ripping armor off the vehicle and throwing it at another unit, which is really cool. So for each mortal wound you do, you send some damage over to the other unit on a 3+. This one, like Fury of Medusa, is situational. It's relatively cheap to cast at Warp Charge 6, but if the cards are in your favor and things are lined up properly, this thing can do some damage. You can rip 3 mortal wounds off a vehicle and potentially send 3 mortal wounds into another unit that's close by, which is really neat, which is a way to bounce mortal wounds into something else. Very, very neat. So overall, Technomancy Discipline is really cool, and it makes it really hard to choose, considering the Space Marine ones in the Codex are already cool. All of these are pretty sweet, you know, depending what you're going up against. Really cool stuff. Realizing that I'm an hour here, but there is a lot to talk about in this Codex. So I've gone over the stratagems. Now I'd like to go over the relics, because there are a couple of specific things here. Firstly, the relics. You cannot use the relics of Medusa, so the Iron Hands relics, if you're an Iron Hands successor chapter. Along with Iron Father Pharaohs, he is specifically Iron Hands. So this is one of those issues where if you are an Iron Hands successor chapter, you can't take full advantage here. So there is one stratagem that will allow you use this stratagem after nominating a model drawn from an Iron Hands successor chapter to be your warlord. You can give 1 relic of Medusa to a character model from your army that is drawn from the Iron Hands successor chapter instead of giving them special issue War Gear relic or a chapter relic from Space Marines. If you do, replace the Iron Hands keyword in all the instances on that relic, if any, with that model's chapter keyword, so your successor chapter, if you've chosen one or you have your own chapter. But you can only use it once per battle, and it costs you a command point to do it. So that's kind of, it's a little rough. But you do have something else here. So I'll get to that in a sec, because effectively there are 2 pages of relics. The first page is exclusive to Iron Hands only, barring that stratagem, should you choose to use it. So, man, it's, so there's a lot here. There is a lot here. Again, really powerful. Axe of Medusa. This is just a wicked power axe. Instead of a power axe, you get +3 strength, -3 AP, 3 flat damage. Wow, good. The Aegis Ferrum, Primaris model only. Add 1 to the toughness of a model with this relic. So keep in mind, if you've got a Primaris model in Gravis armor, he will be toughness 6. When resolving an attack made against that model, reduce any damage inflicted by 1 to a minimum of 1. So that is really tough. So any Primaris character suddenly becomes really tough. Extra toughness and reducing damage to a minimum of 1. So any single damage attacks, not going to affect it. Anything damage 2 and above, you're reducing that by 1. That's great. The Mind Forge. This is a model equipped with a force sword, force axe, or force stave, so a psyker. The relic replaces the force sword, force axe, or force stave. Times 2 strength, minus 3 AP, D3 damage. So it's kind of like getting a power fist for your psyker. It replaces any of their force weapons. That one's pretty cool. Betrayer's Bane. This one's really neat. It's very simple and very cool, and I've almost taken it a few times if there weren't some relics that were just a little better. Effectively, Betrayer's Bane is a combi melta. So you get a bolt weapon, a bolt gun, and a melta gun as well. But in this case, the melta gun is assault 2 instead of assault 1. And if you've put that on a character like a captain, he's probably going to hit with both of those shots, which means you get 2 melta gun shots, which is really, really cool. The Iron Stone, this one is dope. When resolving an attack made against an Iron Hands vehicle within 3 inches of a friendly model with this relic, reduce any damage inflicted by 1 to a minimum of 1. Again, just making your Iron Hands vehicles so hard to kill. This is yet another piece to that like unkillable puzzle that just makes your distant Iron Hands vehicles ludicrously tough to kill. Reducing the damage, ignoring wounds on 6s, all of your heavy weapons become better. Repairs are easy to do with your characters. You can do them twice. You have a psychic power that repairs vehicles. Oh, I'm thinking like if you've got Iron Father Pharaohs and another character nearby with the Iron Stone, those vehicles now have a 5-up invulnerable save. They're tough. They have armor anyways. They ignore wounds on 6s. They can be repaired. The damage is reduced by 1. Like it just, I can see like seething anger in my opponent's face as like I'm going through these steps of like you cannot damage me, and it's rough. So this one, the Ironstone, is probably one of the best ones here, and it's tied with one more, the Tempered Helm. Whilst a model from your army with this relic is on the battlefield, you can roll a d6 for each command point you spend to use a stratagem. On a 5+, the command point is refunded. And of course, you can only get one command point refunded per battle round, but that is a lot of chances to get a command point each battle round, which is very, very good. On a 5-up, and it's each time, so if you use a 2 command point stratagem, you're rolling 2 dice. Any 5s, you're just getting a command point back. You can't get 2, of course, because it's per battle round, but that still means that virtually, I mean, if you've got the character with this on the battlefield, anytime you use a stratagem, you're going to be getting a command point back on a 5, which is potential to basically get a command point refunded every battle round. And considering the stratagems, both in the Space Marine Codex and the Iron Hand supplement, are very strong, you're going to want command points. So that one's very strong. That and the Iron Stone are kind of neck and neck as awesome relics. And then you've got the Gorgon's Chain. A model with this relic has a 4+ invulnerable save. When resolving an attack made against a ranged weapon, with a ranged weapon against the model, subtract 1. Oh, sorry guys, that's number 2. It's been a very long day apparently. So you get a 4+ invuln save. So that obviously, if you're taking that on a captain, it's not really helpful considering the captain already has that. But if you have, say, a lieutenant, your lieutenant now has an invulnerable save, or a librarian. And resolving an attack made with a ranged weapon, subtract 1 from the wound roll. That one, it sounds really good, but if you're playing your cards right, your characters are not open for ranged attacks. They shouldn't be. But it can allow you to get a little more cocky with your movements of your characters. Say like, come on, shoot me, I dare you. Now I've got an invulnerable save, and you're subtracting 1 from the wound roll, so bring it on. So you can do that to make, like, say, a lieutenant, a librarian, a Tech Marine, even tougher. Because a Tech Marine doesn't have an invulnerable save. So that's pretty good. You put the Gorgon's Chain on a bike Tech Marine. That'd be pretty cool. Because biking around trying to repair vehicles, he might get himself into an exposed position. And that 4+ invulnerable save, toughness 5 for being on a bike, 2+ armor save, subtracting 1 from the wound roll, ignoring wounds on 6s. That Tech Marine on bike is suddenly very hard to kill. So those are the relics of Medusa specific to the Iron Hands. So only the Iron Hands can take those. But then there's another page right next to it called Special Issue War Gear. So the Iron Hands have a proud tradition of crafting specialized weaponry and war gear that aid in the optimization of their warriors' lethality. That many of their designs verge on technological heresy is a detail tacitly ignored by the Adeptus Mechanicus, who benefit greatly from the shared lore. So, better stuff. Now this, if your army is led by an Iron Hands warlord or a warlord drawn from an Iron Hands successor chapter, you can give one of the following special issue war gear relics to an Iron Hands character model from your army. So this special issue war gear allows you, if you choose Iron Hands as a successor, or you take whatever the successor chapters are, there are a few, but I think you can just make your own too. But there are a few Iron Hands successor chapters. Let's just find one as an example. What do we got here? No, I thought they had a list of successors. Maybe I'm missing it. Father Pharaohs, da-da-da. This is all the other stuff. No. Oh. For some reason, I thought there was a list. Anyhow, probably... Oh, there we go. We got some in the pictures there. Sons of Medusa, Brazen Claws, Iron Lords, Red Talons, or anything you choose. I mean, you could make your own, iron hippos or whatever you so choose if you like painting hippos on their pauldrons. You can choose from the special issue war gear. So, Adamantine Mantle, which is fun to say. It's got a lot of points to it. So what this does is it's a relic that allows a model to not lose wounds on a 5+. So instead of a 6+, on a 5+, they don't lose wounds. Keep in mind, though, that does not stack with the stratagem. It specifically states only the warlord trait stacks with the stratagem, not this. Artificer Armor. A model with this relic has a save characteristic of 2+ and a 5+ invulnerable save. That could be also super cool for a lieutenant or a librarian. Just stack their armor. Master Crafted Weapon. When you give a model this relic, select one weapon that model is equipped with. Add 1 to the damage characteristic of that weapon. That weapon is considered to be a chapter relic. So, Thunder Hammers come to mind. Having a 4 damage Thunder Hammer, that's pretty cool. Having a Combi Melta, that can now is D6 plus 1 damage, and if you're in half range, roll 2 D6, pick the highest, add 1 to that damage. That could be pretty cool. So, it's worth noting too, and I was thinking of some neat little little combos here, considering you can make Dreadnoughts characters. The issue is that a character, you cannot select a vehicle. So there's that. You can select bikes or infantry, effectively, but you cannot select a vehicle. Too bad. So you can't have a master crafted weapon on a dreadnought that's got like twin las cannons or something. But still, there's potential for that. Having a cheap power fist, which is cheap now. For 9 points, a power fist is very, very deadly. Adding 1 to the damage characteristic of a power fist is now D3 plus 1. Very cool. Digital weapons. So when a model with this relic fights, it can make one additional attack using the close combat weapon profile. When resolving an attack, if a hit is scored, the target suffers one mortal wound and the sequence ends. So you get a bonus attack, and if you hit, it's a bonus mortal wound. I'm not sure if that mortal wound replaces regular damage. It doesn't say in addition, so I'm not certain. Auto Medicae Bionics. If a model with this relic has lost any wounds, at the start of your turn, it regains up to D3 lost wounds. That's cool. You have a character that just gets wounds back. Teeth of Mars. Model equipped with a chainsword. This relic replaces the chainsword. Strength user, -2 AP, 2 damage. When the bearer fights, it makes one additional attack. So right off the bat, you can see that this is worse than the Teeth of Terra, which is a relic in the Space Marine Codex. But when resolving an attack made with this weapon against a vehicle, this weapon has a strength of ×2. So, while it's not as great at clearing out hordes as the Teeth of Terra, the Teeth of Mars is more situationally damaging to vehicles, and very much so, as it is strength ×2. There's no negative to hitting with it. It's -2 AP, 2 damage, and you do get one additional attack. Haywire Bolts. When you give a model this relic, select one bolt weapon that model is equipped with. When the bearer shoots with that weapon, you can choose for it to fire a Haywire Bolt. If you do, you can only make one attack with that weapon. But when resolving that attack, if it is made against a vehicle, an unmodified wound roll of 4/5 inflicts D3 mortal wounds on the target in addition to any other damage. And an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts 3 mortal wounds on the target in addition to any other damage. So this can basically turn any bolt weapon into a tank hunting weapon, which is cool. So while it's simply unmodified wound rolls, it may be good to take, say, a master crafted bolt gun, where you do get 2 damage normally, there's a minus to the AP, and then if you get a 4, 5, or 6, even if you don't wound normally, you're still getting those mortal wounds. And if you get a 6, you're wounding, and you're getting those mortal wounds. So that could be pretty cool too. So Teeth of Mars and Haywire Bolts both deal with vehicles. So not only are the Iron Hands vehicles hard to kill, the Iron Hands are good at killing other vehicles. Fortis Pattern Data Spike. Tech Marine only. When a model with this relic uses their Blessing of the Omnissiah ability, roll 2 dice when determining how many wounds are regained, and discard one of the results. So for that D3, you roll 2 dice, you pick the highest, and you get to repair your vehicle just a little better, which is very good. So considering this, you can do some really, really cool stuff. Very, very cool. So the issue, though, that with using an Iron Hands successor chapter is that, one, you don't get access to the relics of Medusa, and as far as I can tell, so successor chapters, if you include an Adeptus Astartes unit in your army that has a chapter keyword, you must decide what chapter it's from, blah, blah, blah. Unless you choose the first founding chapters, then your chapter is successor. If the successor chapter you've chosen is one established in the background or publication's founding chapter will often be known. For example, the Red Talons chapter is a known successor of the Iron Hands. If the successor chapter you've chosen does not have a known founding, but has the Inheritors of the Primarch successor chapter tactic, which is in the Space Marine Codex, you can select the first founding chapter. So, if your chapter is a successor of the Iron Hands, the following rules apply. If your warlord is a character model from your Iron Hand successor chapter, you can use the Iron Hand Warlord's trait table. So you can use Iron Hand's warlord traits. Replace the Iron Hand keyword in all instances in that Warlord trait, if any, with Warlord's chapter keyword. Chapter relics. Iron Hand successor chapters have access to the special issue war gear. That's the page I told you about. Relics of Medusa cannot be given to a character model from a successor chapter unless you use the Bequeath by the Iron Council stratagem. So that 1 CP stratagem, you can basically, they're giving you a toy from the Iron Hands to your successor chapter. Stratagems. All units from Iron Hand successor chapters are considered to have the Iron Hands keyword for the purpose of using Iron Hands stratagems. Librarian models from Iron Hand successor chapters can know psychic powers from the Technomancy discipline, and once again, you're replacing all instances of Iron Hands with your chapter keyword. And these also apply to the special 6 tactical objectives for the Iron Hands as well. So as a successor chapter, you get access to Warlord traits, stratagems, psychic powers, special issue war gear, not the relics, unless you use that stratagem, and of course the tactical objectives. And you will also get access to the bonus to the Devastator Doctrine, as far as I know. Whilst the Devastator Doctrine is active, models in with this ability do not suffer the penalty for moving and firing heavy weapons. As far as I know, yes, okay. Every unit from your army is an Iron Hands unit, or every unit in your army is from the same Iron Hand successor chapter. Okay, so Iron Hand successors do get the Devastator Doctrine bonus, rerolling hit rolls of 1 and moving and firing heavy weapons. So the only things that you lose out on for not being specifically Iron Hands is access to the relics, barring paying 1 CP, and the character Iron Father Pharaohs. Otherwise, you have access to pretty much everything. You've got special issue war gear, the stratagems, the psychic powers, the objectives, which are kind of cool, I guess, Warlord traits, and the bonus for being an Iron Hand successor chapter to the Devastator Doctrine. So, I know that was a lot. Basically, if you've stuck around for this long, each of the Codex supplements is going to be like this in its own way, meaning that you can pick a successor chapter to whichever chapter, Imperial Fists, Ultramarines, whatever, and they'll get pretty much all of the benefits, barring use of named characters and some of the relics, but you'll get pretty much everything else. So while it feels as though there is sort of a pigeonhole going on saying like, choose the chapters that we've created, there is also opportunity and plenty of good opportunity to pick a successor chapter either of your own or that they've already made. So you can do that as well. And unfortunately, with books like this and the other Codex supplements, it sort of dissuades the use of making your own chapter with its own successor chapter tactics from the Space Marine rulebook. Because yes, you'll be getting the Space Marine stratagems. Yes, you'll be getting the Space Marine relics and psychic discipline, and those are all very good. They're all very, very good. Don't let me have you believe that all the ones in the successor books are better. I'm not saying that. What you don't get, though, is you don't get the bonus to the tactical doctrines that these chapters do get. And in the case of the Iron Hands, it is so powerful. Now, if you play a different way entirely, if you play in a way that has, say you've got like tons of bikes, fast-moving army, maybe some jump packs, or all infantry or something like that, I don't know, and you don't really use heavy weapons that much, then it won't really be a big deal. But the thing is, Each of the successor chapters has one. So I bet you'll find it hard to find, once all the successor chapter books have been released, you'll find it hard to find one that has a tactical or a combat doctrine bonus that doesn't really apply to you. So in that way, you're really getting a bonus by playing these guys. And to be honest, when I'm playing my games, I'm gonna use the Iron Hands now because, wow, I get to use all my vehicles. They're all really good and really tough, and I get that bonus, that huge bonus to heavy weapons. All in all, this is an amazing book. It's too good. It's too good. I have a feeling some things are going to go down at this point. It was too much of a swing in the other direction. Too many bonuses. You know, you got combat doctrines, the bolter discipline, the shock assault rule, all the tactical doctrine bonuses, and then the Iron Hands tactical doctrine bonus, and then the specific stratagems that are all really good, and then the character that's ludicrously underpriced and very powerful. And you've got yourself a crazy army that will probably see a lot of use in the next few months. And you're bound to see maybe at your local gaming club, oh, I'm playing Iron Hands. And your opponent says, and I will go home. Maybe not, probably not. I'm exaggerating, but you'll probably see it, you know, it'll see a lot of use in the days to come. But I have a feeling that there will be some pullbacks in terms of rules. Maybe the Devastator Doctrine bonus, we'll see some sort of nerf. I have a feeling Iron Father Pharaohs is going to go up in points. I'd see him at like 130, maybe 140 points, and that would be like fair. 130 would be fair. Yeah, and that would kind of dial it back just a touch. But anyhow, overall, great book. Really cool to use the Codex supplements. You can use pretty much everything in the Space Marine Codex with one of your supplements, and they'll work very well together. So this is the for now, it's the era of Space Marines. So it seems. Anyhow, thanks for sticking around. If you watched it all the way through, I appreciate it. And let me know what you think. If you play with Iron Hands, if you use one of the other successor books and you have some sort of combos that you think work really good together, that I'd actually love to hear about. Because I've had a look. I've looked through the Ultramarine one. I've got a buddy who has it. I've looked through some of the stuff in the Raven Guard one as it was coming out and being released along with White Scars. But it seems to me that the Iron Hands one is the strongest, at least for the type of army that I play. Anyhow, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.